Hello, everybody, and welcome to Busy Playing Something, episode 15. I'm your host for today, Sean, joined by a Nintendo fan, diehard supporter who hates PlayStation, Joshua LaRosa.
I'm starting to build out a little bit of a Nintendo shrine up there, aren't I? I just
You
realized.
are you're starting to go across, and I think with one of our topics today, I think we're going to go more and more into how Nintendo is so awesome and PlayStation is not. But yeah,
One
you're
sec.
starting to get the Nintendo stuff going. So he's got the one sec straight away. Like we've started this 30 seconds in. He's like, I need to do show and tell for a second.
That's
So
how
here
you.
we go. What?
That's how you start a show. I found
Yeah.
this when I was doing my clean out.
Yeah. Your Game Boy Advance SP.
Yep. Oh.
Is that Emerald?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. Yep. And I'm like, man, I haven't seen this in years. I need to find. It's obviously got no battery, but I need to find a cable to charge it. So I'm gonna have to buy an aftermarket
You
one.
can just ask me. I've got plenty because the Game Boy Advance SP uses the same charge cable as the Nintendo DS.
Yes, correct. And I have no idea where my DS. I think
And
from that generation onwards, I think I gave a lot of that stuff to my younger brother, and probably the way.
did you see that all the way back there?
Yeah. Yep.
So I've finally got all the stands and all that sort of stuff for all the handhelds. So like you've got your Game Boy, which is like the original
Yeah,
Game
I can
Boy.
see that. And
Your
then
Game
there's
Boy
a
Color, that's the
color
Advance.
advance.
There's a red SP like back there.
Is that a
bit.
micro?
Yeah, that's a Game Boy Micro.
God, how the heck can I see that from here?
It's a Game Boy Micro. And then there's like a DS Lite, a couple of PSPs, a Vita. Yeah, I've got them all like
The
lined up
handheld
over
shrine.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna get another bookcase next to it and for some other things. So,
But yeah, I was doing a bit of a
the group's
clean
starting
out
to come together.
and just found stuff. I've got, you can't really see, but behind the box PS3 that's in the corner there's a box Super Nintendo from when I was younger, much
Yep.
younger. But yeah, I kind of felt like, oh man, I am kind of somewhat of a Nintendo fan, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. I've found that as well, and you know you see this on every show. I've got like GameCube games behind me, and you can probably see Wii and Wii U over my head. I've got a lot of Nintendo stuff I've looked at. Like yeah, obviously PlayStation 2 has a shit ton of games, but otherwise I've always appreciated Nintendo and their quality, and I think like one of the best marketing gimmicks that they ever had was to have that Nintendo seal of quality on those old games. Because now when you start to see it, it's like, oh, okay, Nintendo signed off on that. Remember Eternal Darkness? Yeah, Nintendo signed off on that quality. Seal of
Miyamoto's there with
approval.
the stamp. I think I'm a lapsed Nintendo fan. Like I don't really play. I've got a Switch. You know, you'll probably remember my Metroid Dread
Yeah.
love affair, but I don't really play too much on it. But I think I'm just Nintendo's kind of like that brand where it's like, even though I might not play a Nintendo game for 10 years, but you could jump back in at any point, and it's not like you really missed. Like, what are you playing? I'm playing Zelda. I'm playing Mario. Like, it's just easier to come in and out of. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's my my Nintendo experience. But yeah, I've got a bit of a shrine getting built behind there, but it's mostly stuff from Japan. So
Well, we won't be talking too much about Nintendo today. We're waiting for basically the Nintendo Switch 2. I don't think we really care about anything other than their third quarter earnings call, which that's publicly been released, which I had a look at. But otherwise, we're waiting for the Nintendo Switch 2.
yeah,
Not
nothing
mute
until 2025. They basically said keep waiting. In the meantime, here's a clock and here's a music app. Have fun.
Yeah, yeah, with licensed music.
Yeah.
And here's an ad about you commuting with your Nintendo Switch for 1 minute, and that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. That's the ad. Anyway,
Nearly hitting through PS2 numbers though, 144 million, only about 5 or so million away from eclipsing the PlayStation 2. So maybe
we've got
that's what they're holding out for. They're like,
we've
need
got to pay the respects. Yeah,
Yeah.
pay the respects to the console. Anyway, we are going to move on. We are busy playing something. If you haven't heard of us already, we are a video game podcast down here in Melbourne, Australia. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I think we're on Google Podcasts as well. You can find us obviously on YouTube, busy playing something. And you can find both myself and Josh on social medias, myself at Holy DePrawn and Josh at Joshua LaRosa. Now, we've got a couple of topics that we want to kick into. One of them's a little bit of a follow-up from last week when we talked, well, last fortnight, which was Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and the launch that happened during Game Pass. And we'll go into a little bit more details about it. I've been playing the game, but we'll get to that. But firstly, we want to talk about PlayStation, which is Josh's second favorite subject to asking about native PS3 on the PS5, and that is PlayStation's troubled games as a service initiative. So we've got to keep in mind, PlayStation really wanted to push this initiative. We had Fortnite, we had Genshin Impact, we had all these games as a service games that were doing really well. PlayStation wanted a piece of the pie. Then there's been a couple of little acquisitions, a couple of changes. All of a sudden, it's been cut back, and now it's like, well, maybe they made the wrong choice. So, Josh, you've looked into a little bit about their push of live service. The fact that they've gone from a forecast of 12 games as a service games on the PlayStation 5 by 2026, then it was down to 6. Now, we don't know. A couple of them have already been cancelled, like with Concord, for example, the most recent one. And I'm pretty sure Babylon's 4 was one too, which you remember that one? Because I don't, even though I own a copy. So what are we thinking, Josh, in terms of where Sony's at, what they've got to do? Like, has this been a mistake for them?
Yeah, and maybe what I'll do, Sean, is maybe I'll just read through, because I kind of typed up a bit of like a bit of a history lesson, but this is obviously off the back of Firewalk and Concord being closed, which has been in the news cycle this week. They've closed the studio, but basically what you said, right? They had ambitions, major ambitions, after they saw the money that was coming in from Fortnite and Genshin Impact, right? And like you said, 12 games as a service was the plan by financial year 25. We saw during that time a major, I guess, spending spree in that space to get Sony to the point where they had those games, right? That's where we saw Firewalk be acquired. That's where we saw the partnership with Deviation Games. That's when they purchased Bungie for $3.7 billion. They had a major push. And very much like you said, in that same year, they cut back from 12 to 6. And then it was made abundantly clear that maybe they had kind of bitten off more than they could chew, and we kind of saw behind the scenes how it started to all fall apart. So Concord's just the latest in that kind of saga. Obviously released earlier in September, and then was taken offline within a week or two.
September?
Yeah. Was taken offline in 2 weeks' time. Behind the scenes, kind of Sony, I guess, made the impression that they were working on how they would bring the game back and what that may look like. We spoke about a fortnight ago if perhaps they were planning to bring it back as a free-to-play title. But then they've just come out and basically said, you know what, that's not going to happen. We're gonna close it. So I got a quote here from Herman Holst, who's obviously head of Sony's PlayStation division. So this is taken directly from the PlayStation blog. And it's important to note as well, this is in conjunction to the closure of Neon Koi, which is their mobile studio. It was formerly known as Savage Studio previously. So both have been closed. So, quote, "I know none of this is easy news to hear, particularly with colleagues and friends departing SIE. Obviously, PlayStation CEO, blah, 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 blah. Both decisions were given serious thought and ultimately felt that this was the right one to strengthen the organization. Neo Koi and Firework were home to many talented individuals, and we worked to find them, blah, 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 blah." But ultimately, like I said, the studios have been closed. So Herman also went on to say how they worked behind the scenes to find the best path forward, but they ultimately came to the decision to shutter Concord, close the studio, close Neon Koi. And this is just one of several closures, cancellations that we've seen from PlayStation. Like, if I was to rattle off from the top of my head, right? We saw the Spider-Man through the Insomniac leak. We know that Insomniac were developing a multiplayer Spider-Man game that ultimately got cancelled. I think a trailer even leaked for it. Naughty Dog cancelled Last of Us Factions. Sony partnered with Deviation Games with some of the talent behind Call of Duty. That team was ultimately disbanded and the game cancelled. Concord, right? But we've also seen, I guess, one success, and that was Arrowhead with Helldivers 2, which launched in February, which has sold, I think, 11, 12 million copies. It's widely seen as a major success. So I guess from my perspective as a PlayStation fan, it's kind of like, I get it. I get why you would want a piece of that pie. I guess, if you see it from what Sony were probably thinking, ultimately all the money that comes in from Call of Duty, Fortnite, all these different games gets paid to Sony first, right? Because they're the console holder, they get paid, they take their cut and then pay Activision and pay Mihoverse or whoever, right? So they're probably sitting there and going, holy shit, look how much money we've just given Epic with Fortnite. We could do this. Like, we're PlayStation, we can surely get something up and running. So I don't blame them for going, yeah, we need to be in this space. But it's clearly not as easy as it looks. And then the Bungie acquisition, which is proven out to probably be their Bungie's saving grace, but probably not the wisest financial purchase Sony's ever made, seems to be a bit of a disaster. And it's kind of left people thinking, well, what does this mean moving forward? So that's my high level thoughts. I don't know. There's so many different angles we can attack it. Take the floor.
Well, I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and it kind of ties into the whole thing, especially with the closure of Koi and
Firewalk.
Concord and Firewalk, Concord's developers, was I was seeing. I think there was a couple of different news articles saying the same thing, that they were closing these studios to strengthen Sony's market dominance.
Yeah, I did read an article on that. Yeah.
Like that absolutely baffled me, because okay, so you're strengthening their market dominance. The only thing that tells me is that they're potentially going to make that pivot again and go back to single player, third person, action adventure, story driven games, because that's where their market share really has been. That's where their strong suit has been over the last, I'd say, decade.
Yeah,
so,
I think when they were talking... Sorry, not to cut you off. I was just going to say, because I read that article as well, I'm like, what the hell does this even mean? I think what they were trying to allude to is the idea of, like, you know, it's like Google buying another search engine and then cancelling it and closing it down, right? Like, YouTube's done that with its competitors in the past. It doesn't really make sense in this case, because Sony's intent wasn't to acquire the studio, to launch Concord, lose hundreds of millions of dollars, and cancel it, and close the studio. So I think that article's, misguided. Yeah. Probably the nicest way to put it.
It's almost like the case of, you know, if Sony was to go off and spend $3.7 billion on Bungie and then just shut them down, so that way they no longer make Destiny or no longer work on Marathon. Like that doesn't make sense to me. So I found that a little bit strange. But anyway, speaking of Bungie, I think, and I'm pretty sure I put this through a few episodes ago regarding the acquisition, I think it has been a mistake from Sony's end, purely because they've been keeping Bungie afloat. I don't think anybody realizes just how much of an influence Activision needed to have on their leadership in order to keep them floating and stable, and to have kind of sort of like an income stream the way that it did with, you know, the passes and all that sort of stuff. Now that they wanted to kind of do things themselves, even under Sony, it hasn't worked for them. So that $3.7 billion, where do you think that could have gone instead?
Mate, that could have gone into bolstering the teams they already had, right? Like, I think we saw that a little bit, right? We saw that Sony were, like, expanding Guerrilla, expanding Naughty Dog. Santa Monica was growing. You know, we've heard rumors that there's 2 teams working out of Santa Monica now, right? Where they were historically 1. Naughty Dog was historically 2, then back to 1, and then back to 2. So that was happening, but I think we just saw a bit of an arms race, right? In, 2020. Into COVID, interest rates were low, money was cheap, and both Microsoft and Sony went on a bit of a spending spree. Some acquisitions made sense, some clearly didn't, right? You think of, what's the Nixus, the porting team that are porting their games to PC. Yeah. Brilliant acquisition, right? It's a studio that's doing high quality porting of PlayStation titles. I know your cat obviously misses you. Sean's been away for a few days. That acquisition made perfect sense. Bluepoint, another team that Sony's worked with for 10 plus years. Housemarque, right? The Returnal team. Again, a team that worked with Sony, made sense. But when they were looking at Bungie, I think that they, and we've spoken about this before, was sold the dream that, hey, we could come in and guide your studios and everything that we've spoken about before. That clearly didn't happen. And, I've seen not rumors, but like speculation online, like, is this somehow linked to Jim Ryan's exit, right? He obviously spoke about himself wanting to retire. He's an older, in quotes, person at the age that he may look to retire. He often spoke about the hate of traveling between his home, the US, and then also Japan. So initially, I just took it as, yep, Jim Ryan's retiring. But as this has gone on, it does kind of beg the question that, I don't think Jim Ryan was fired. Like, he's obviously done, PS5's launch was massive, right? And he launched it during a pandemic and was able to navigate that pretty flawlessly. But perhaps, I don't know, maybe his contract came to an end and they kind of said, hey, Jimbo, look, you've done such an amazing job. Here's a great package. We want you to, sunset. We want, here's a nudge. We're not firing you, but you've done an awesome job, but we're not renewing your contract or whatever. Because a lot of these decisions were made under Jim Ryan, right? And Bungie clearly took Sony for a bit of a spin in terms of, like, again, selling the dream. But it's also on Sony to, I guess, look at what they're buying and read the financials. Like, I don't understand how either Bungie straight out lied or was able to muddy the numbers to a point where it fooled Sony. But yeah, it just seems like Sony was Bungie's saving grace when Sony purchased Bungie with the intent of Bungie helping Sony. That's my thoughts on it anyway.
So do you think then that, okay, and this is spitballing a little bit, but do you think that with Jim Ryan's leadership and choices, where it was decided, okay, games as a service is the way to go, they've realized basically in the last few months of his tenure and after he's left, they've realized, hang on a second, this is not the way to go, and slowly but surely they've been dismantling the games as a service plan, and kind of not necessarily saying we made the wrong choice, but if you slowly cut back the amount of titles that you're going to release, cut back the developing teams, okay, we're going to close these ones, like, and do it slowly but quietly, eventually ramping back up to, okay, well, we knew this was working, which was, your first party, third person action adventure narrative driven story games, that was working for us. We're going to slowly cut back over a year to 2 years, which is a long time in the grand scheme of it, because you've got to think about marketing and appearances and everything like that, just to get almost back on track to where they were.
It's tough because the reason they did that is because the margins on these AAA games are getting thinner and smaller, right? So they're, I'm often quoted as the sustainability guy, and I talk about, is this sustainable? Is that sustainable? Is AAA development on Sony's level sustainable? $300 million for Spider-Man 2 probably isn't when you also need to pay Marvel, right? So I guess the way that they were seeing it is like, we need to diversify, because it only takes one of these games to be a massive success. You get a Fortnite, you get a whatever out of one of these games. The other 11 could be massive failures, and that's enough to fund PlayStation titles moving forward if you get a constant revenue stream. So I think they knew. I don't think that the plan was to ever release 12 successful games. I think they just needed to do it. And I don't disagree with that. I think where they went too far was touching any of their existing establishing studios. And asking them or forcing them or whatever to develop these games that they're not built to make, right? Insomniac was multiplayer. They've got a multiplayer background, right? Like, Insomniac's done multiplayer games before. But, do we need that? Do we need Naughty Dog creating these things? What they should have done, which they did do initially, was just to partner with second parties, right? Not fully publish and own and develop everything, but just maybe they just publish the game. They pay for the game's development, right? As opposed to owning the team, which they, funny we talk about Firewalk. That was what Firewalk was. Firewalk was a independent team working with a publisher called probably Monsters, I think it was. And Sony was acting as like a second party co-funder publisher, right? That game was developed and could have still been released under that format, but Sony saw something in the team and then acquired the team, so they took on all that risk. That was the mistake. They needed to just. I think if I was running Sony, I would, like, in PlayStation, not Sony, but PlayStation. I think I would have a focus on a few things. Firstly, would be okay. We know story-driven narrative single-player games is our bread and butter, and we want to continue to make those, but we need to make those quicker and smarter and cheaper. Let's focus heavily on how we can develop games quicker, work within different teams to kind of share workload, how we can offshore certain things, how we can use AI. Let's get these games at the same quality, but not costing $300 million and not taking 5 years. Let's get that to $200 million and 3 years. That should be a focus. The second focus should be expanding the portfolio in terms of types of games, right? Including games as a service. But let's do that as a second party. Let's cherry pick games and teams that we see behind the scenes that are developing something good, give them the funds, but not take the risk up front. I think Sony just hoped Concord, they saw something and said, well, let's get in now before this gets big. And then we own it, right? But clearly wasn't the way to go. And I don't know what they saw in Concord. From all accounts, I never got to play it. I'm kind of devastated that I didn't play the beta just to at least have tried it. All accounts, the game ran fine, played fine, but was just nothing special. The biggest critique we heard about it was the art design, which I agree. And it's,
it was another character online shooter. So you weren't necessarily playing an avatar that you can create and kind of customize. Like, you were playing characters that you had to care about.
And these characters were characters we've seen in like Marvel movies before. It was nothing new. So that was the mistake. So again, I think it would be how we reduce money on develop single player games, second party strategic pools, and then if you're going to acquire anybody, you acquire teams you've worked with and understand their culture for at least 10 years, right? Like Arrowhead makes sense, right? They worked with Helldivers. They basically funded the whole of Helldivers 2 and also published Helldivers 1. So they've worked with Arrowhead for, I think, when was Helldivers? 2014, 2015? For at least nearly 10 years, right? So that would have made sense. And yeah, I just think Concord was a huge miss. In fact, it's probably Sony's biggest financial flop ever, right? If the rumors to be true of 200 plus million, not including the acquisition of the team and all that, it's Sony's biggest failure ever. And I think we should be concerned if the people there saw something in this game. I think it's something we should be like, ooh, what does that mean for future games?
Yeah, who were the ones that actually saw something in the team to be
Apparently
able to say,
it was Herman Holst. Apparently Herman was a big fan of Concord, was championing it behind the scenes. And I'm like...
Now he's in charge of PlayStation.
Exactly. So that begs the question. And I apologize. I know I've been rambling a lot and I want to hear your thoughts.
No, that's okay. No, because I had some questions. I wanted to kind of hear it from you a little bit because, like, I know that these sorts of games aren't your repertoire. So being able to see it from like a PlayStation player, generally a PlayStation player, is kind of like that. I think that's the interesting thing because we hear a lot from people who play multiple consoles like me. Like, at the end of the day, for me, Concord closed, so be it. I've got other games, but like for you, like this matters because if Concord was successful, well, that's going to really help drive this change to games as a service that Sony was trying to do for the last few years. So I think it has more of an impact on someone like yourself rather than me. And so in saying that, you've got games like Final Fantasy XIV Online, which is now on Xbox, or now coming to Xbox. So that's been a game that's been PC and PlayStation, purely between the two. And basically PlayStation were helping assist with, having it on there as the third party. So now that that's been taken away, the fact that they've changed some of the games in terms of games as a service, they've got Helldivers 2, sure, but yeah, Concord and all that, like they've all disappeared. There is that whole change. Do you think that's putting pressure on games as a service for PlayStation now? Like, what sort of messaging should we expect? Should it be like, okay, like we've had some hiccups, but there will be more games as a service games on the way? Or do we think, okay, well, we're going to change tact and games as a service is now not going to be 6 in the next 2 years. It's going to be maybe 2, and hopefully they're Helldivers 2 equivalent.
Yeah. Well, they actually say that as part of their closing thoughts on the Concord thing, right? They said, unfortunately, we didn't hit our targets, blah, 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 but we will take the lessons learned from Concord and continue to advance our live service capabilities to deliver future growth in this area. I mean, I think, to answer your question, I think the team should be nervous. Like, I look at Haven Studios, right? That was another acquisition that's making, oh my god, I can't even think of the game, but it's basically like a Rainbow Siege type thing. If you can find it for me, it's
Yep.
something with, it's got a $ in the name, and I'm just blanking it. But I'd be nervous if I was that team, right? They're an unproven team.
Fair Games.
Fair Games, that's it. Yeah, and the S is with the $.
Yep.
Yeah, I would be nervous if I was them and launching Fair Games, in the sense that they're a team that Sony acquired around the same time, haven't released a game before. We saw how this went. I just think the smartest thing Sony... It's hard because they had to talk strategy at their investor call. I just wouldn't have put any number on it. I wouldn't say we want X amount of games. Like, it needs to be...
generic?
The messaging should have been, we are investing in this space and we are, hand-picking or, working to ensure the quality meets PlayStation Studios. Because I think games like Concord and Fair Games are at a disadvantage from the get-go. Purely based on all the reaction of gamers when they saw 12 games as a service from Sony. Like, it just automatically sours any game, because it's like, well, why are you making this? You could be making something else. So there's already that inherent disadvantage. I think if they were just a little bit more like, if the messaging was, hey, we're cherry picking, hand picking, developing, making strategic partnering decisions to make these games, I think people would be a bit more comfortable with it. And then again, if we didn't have all those cancellations that we know about, it's a ripple effect that now when the next game comes, because if you think about it, they've had one major success in Helldivers and then Concord. When Fair Games comes, or whenever the next Games as Service game comes, that's now going to be marred by Concord, and people are going to be saying, is this the next Concord, blah, 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 blah. So I think we should be cautious. And again, I think if it was me and I was making games as a service, I wouldn't be making shooters. Like, I'd be doing... You can do some really... Like, you look at Monster Hunter, right? Like, they're Wilds just had their beta and it was, like, massive on Steam and PlayStation, right? And obviously Monster Hunter's an established franchise. But, like, the play on games as a service, where it's still a multiplayer type experience, but not everything needs to be a first-person hero shooter. You could have... Look at Rocket League, right? Like, something that's just simple, right? And maybe that needed to be the investment, right? We're gonna spin up some second-party teams. We're gonna use XDev. We're gonna, hey, Insomniac, we want 50 people from this. We want 50 people out of your 300 developers, right? A small team making a small game, in quotes. That is one of the 12 games as a service, not, hey, we want to take you 250 developers, we're going to buy the team, and here's $300 million, go. It's not the way you do it. I think smaller games, like we're seeing indie or AA games kind of look AAA, right? Like, we're seeing that. Why not work towards that? Work on something that looks AAA, smaller scope, but there's a catch. The Rocket League had it's soccer with cars, like a hook.
A hook. Not a catch, a hook.
A hook. A hook. Instead of, hey, we're going to do a Overwatch Lite, but we're going to take Guardians of the Galaxy characters and story, themes, and mash that all together. That doesn't work. But what would you do in this sense?
Well, one of the things that, like, before I get to that, one of the things that you actually said makes me worried is the fact that, if let's say they go with the messaging of, they're handpicking, they're cherry picking particular games as a service games, and they're going to help, fund them, develop them, whatever it may be. If you go with that messaging for what's happened, So what they've basically said is we handpicked 12. Now we're changing it to 6. And now the ones that we have picked, we've got a hit and a miss.
Mm.
I'm more worried about that than anything else, because how can you rely on whoever's in charge to pick the right ones, especially when we've already been told, oh yeah, we picked 12 and now we're not doing 6 of them.
Yeah, and look, I think when I said that, it's on the basis that they hadn't said 12, and that Concord wasn't one of those games, right? Like, so and I get it. It's not an easy thing to do to pick, some the next big thing, but Sony have shown ability to do that, right? You think about the games that come as an exclusive in a third party or a second party sense. They're games that Sony's gone out and purchased exclusivity on, right? Because they see something in the game. Whether or not Black Myth Wukong was that or not, but even in their indie space, like when PlayStation was doing their big indie push, they had games like Stray or Sifu, where I guess that would be Shuhei, but like someone within Sony going, yes, we see something in this, we want this game linked to PlayStation. And exclusivity doesn't need to be the answer. It could still be a game that's on Xbox, but as long as it's in a third party sense, as long as the game's linked to PlayStation, that's all that really matters. So I agree. If they were to come out now and say, hey, look, we've taken, basically what they said, we've taken the lessons and the next releases were going to be things that we believe. Well, you believed in Concord, right? That's the issue. And we still know there is other stuff coming. There's the Horizon multiplayer game that's apparently in development. One of the 10 other Horizon games that's coming. Like, there's still games down the track, but they need to just condense the scope and just work on a gameplay hook.
Yeah. Now, I am going to answer your other part of the question, is what would I do if I was running PlayStation and I'm guessing that's in terms of already decided on we're doing games as a service and then kind of making the decision from there. I guess that's where you're coming from. Yep. So I'm very similar to what you would do. I would continue with first party development the way that it has been going. I wouldn't change that. So you've got games like Wolverine coming up, for example. Spider-Man 2, instead of thinking about, doing a games as a service version or a multiplayer version, get some story DLC out there, man. Do that first before even considering a PC port, which they're already doing early next year. I don't understand why they're doing a PC port instead of doing like story DLC like the first Spider-Man first. Like follow what works and go from there. And at least when you release story DLC, you can have your remastered version. You'll get another bump in sales. People will be like, oh, there's more content. Like that's the sort of path I'd go for first party. But then when you bring in games as a service, yes, you can look at already established games and think, okay, well, there's minimal risk here. We'll now fund the rest of it, come under the PlayStation umbrella, and we'll carry on from there. So that could be your Bungie Destiny sort of thing. Like I get that, and yep, that is 100% what I'd be looking at doing. Bungie, obviously, case by case basis. Bungie, probably bad idea, but I'd be looking at getting independent developers, third-party developers who, you've worked with before, that can make online games as a service games, not ones that have done first player, single player, 4-hour games. It's like, all right, now you're going to make a games as a service game. Like, unless it's going to be not similar, but unless it's within scope for that team, you want to be able to pick and choose particular teams to make those particular games. If you just say, okay, we're going to invest in games as a service and then do a scattergun approach, and it's like, okay, who's willing to make a games as a service game for us? Yep, awesome, you're hired. Or, okay, we'll acquire you, or, oh, we'll fund you. Like, that seems very, almost desperate. Yeah. And that's a position that Sony isn't in. But it sounds desperate to me.
And it's the wrong approach. Like, you think of every game that's not every game, but there's examples of the opposite. But, I mean, the ones we listed off, Fortnite, Genshin, they're all graphically light, in quotes, games that run on mobile. So, in my mind, I'm like, well, why would you... In what world did you think that if we developed a $100, $200, $300 million game, that is graphically intense, and then we want to support this game, like, you're going to have to make content on that level. Like, everything's going to need to be the same level of quality as the base game, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. In my mind, the game that would make the perfect sense is make a Horizon game, which I think this is what's happening. A Horizon game that's in like a Monster Hunter style multiplayer that is cell shaded. That is not Fortnite look, but animated, right? I could see that working, especially if it's going to be developed with NetEase or whatever. But like, even if it's more like a Marvel Rivals, is that their multiplayer one that's...
Yeah.
Like that style, like a stylistic version of Horizon. And people be like, but that's not Horizon. I'm like, well, Lego is not Horizon either, but it works. You can take that character, that world, and go on a hunt to take down a mammoth tooth, right? And you've got your team of 4 or 5 people that you customize, that you buy skins for, and you do all that. And you go out on these hunts and you grind and do all those different things. That makes more sense to me, and releases on console and mobile, and it costs... You know what I mean? Like, mobile can run games on a level now that...
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I'm thinking like the Horizon brand. Mobile, okay. I would almost go PlayStation PC.
Oh, I would have PC, PlayStation, and mobile, or maybe PC, PlayStation, then it comes to mobile. You know what I mean?
Maybe maybe mobile later, because like I can see like a Monster Hunter with a Horizon skin. Like, that's it. You don't even need the cell shot. I can see that happening.
Yeah.
But now that they've they're still doing this push for PC, like Spider-Man 2 is what, a year, maybe a year and a half, and it's moving to PC.
Yeah.
Like PlayStation has made a change from their games as a service to their console exclusives.
Yeah, the whole thing's changed.
The whole thing's changed. Yeah. And that's another discussion that we're going to have another time. But yeah, so Sony's in an interesting spot where they're market leaders, yet
they seem scattered.
Yeah, because we've said this from the beginning, that they're able to let Xbox just, you make the decisions, whether it's bad or good. You make the decisions. If it works,
we'll take it.
We'll take it. We'll have our version. If it doesn't work, that's fine. We can ignore it. Keep doing what we're doing. But now Sony's suddenly in this position where they're making decisions and they're not necessarily paying off. Like PC, yep, 100%, totally understand. Where's Bloodborne? But like for everything else, it's not quite making sense to me. And this might be a Herman Hulst thing. It might be just a change in mindset. It might be, maybe the appearance of the PlayStation 5 Pro, and how they've been very adamant that it is not meant to be like a next gen equivalent kind of jump. It's a more polished, refined version of this generation. And it's still, like, in some instances, it's still weaker than the Xbox Series X in some instances. So
I think the best thing they did was get, like, when Jim went and they had Hiroki Totoki, who's Sony CFO, step in, and he was making like those statements around Bungie's great, but they got no sense of how to spend money and they need to rein things in. I'm hoping now that under Herman Hulst reporting directly into Totoki, that we're getting, like, we need to dial back. We can't have these budgets blow out any more than they are now, and we can't be developing games any longer. You know what? If I was there, right, I would be doing... I would have every first-party release that is of a AAA single-player narrative experience have a Miles Morales each time. No DLC, but a standalone game that...
Built off the same engine.
Same thing. Perhaps you play a different character, like Uncharted with...
Lost Legacy?
Lost Legacy. I was going to say Fight for Fortune, but that's the card game. Lost Legacy, like that. Let's do that for each game, right? We might not sell... Like, if Spider-Man sells... Maybe Spider-Man's not a great example. Say Uncharted for, 10 million copies, whatever, right? And the expansion we develop in 2 years and sells 5 million. First of all, it fills the gap between releases because games historically take longer. We can make these cheaper. They're shorter experiences. We can still sell them as nearly full price games if we wanted to. Like, Miles Morales is a game. In fact, I think Miles Morales in some instances is better than the original Spider-Man game.
It was more refined. It was
more
polished.
refined. They got rid of all those stupid side quests.
Yeah.
Do that, right? Let's make these games quicker, shorter, cheaper, but let's also release these interstitial, and maybe that's what's happening with Spider-Man, right? They're not going to do DLC, but we get Venom. Like, some sort of interstitial game that comes in conjunction. And then when you want to expand out into mobile, don't make a Uncharted game for mobile.
Yeah.
Make a God of War RPG. Like, something, take your characters, the worlds, and make something interesting for it. In your games as a service, take Horizon and turn it into a Monster Hunter. Like, that's what Nintendo does so well, where it's like, here's Mario driving a car, here's Mario fighting, here's Mario playing soccer, here's Mario... It's the same character, the same world, same art style, whatever, but it's different. And PlayStation's got such a legacy, going back for nearly, 30 plus years now. Like, you can pull threads from different characters and different stories and different worlds and just make things on a smaller scale. If you want to bring back Sly Cooper, right? Don't invest hundreds of millions of it. Give it to a second party team, make it an indie title, release it on mobile, have it on PC.
Make it a 2D side scroller or something.
Yeah, like let's start being creative, and let's take risks, because we need to do that. And in Sony's defense, as a market leader, they don't need to necessarily do that, but they understand to stay ahead, they need to be diversifying. But it's just this whole narrative that they've built up for themselves, which got them to the point of being number one, is like high budget AAA. But that's also now what's going to hurt them, because it's gotten to a point where it's, you're not selling 20, 30 plus million copies like you need to be to justify that budget. You're selling more than you were before, and your games are coming to PC and selling more than they've ever been. But your budgets have doubled and tripled in some instances. So if we can dial that back, Spider-Man 2 didn't need to be $300 million when compared to Spider-Man 1. Like, the game is not that different than the first game. It runs better, it looks better, the mobility is far superior, it's quicker, it's all those different things. But in its bones, it's still Spider-Man. It didn't need to cost that much.
Like, even looking at Nintendo, for example. So, have you looked at their top 10 recently of like sales?
Not recently, but I'm assuming it's Animal Crossing, it's Mario Kart, it's like
I'll give you some lifetime sales to date, and this is until the end of third quarter 2024, right? So these are very recent, right? And I'll go from 10 to number 1. So number 10 is New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, which is at 17.7 million. It sold 3 times more than the Wii U game, of the Wii U version. Super Mario Party, 20.9 million. Tears of the Kingdom, 21 million. Scarlet Violet, 25.6. Sword Shield, 26.4. Mario Odyssey, 28.5. Breath of the Wild, 32. Super Smash Brothers, 35. Animal Crossing, 46.5 million. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It still sold 2.3 million copies this financial year so far. We're in November, and we've only got the stats until the end of September, right? 2.3 million to put it at 64 million copies.
Ridiculous.
Like, that's their top 10. But that's the thing. That's what PlayStation has been pushing, that their games are matching.
They should be selling that much, but they're not.
And they should be. Yeah, exactly. Well, they're not selling the consoles, and they're not selling the games. And Nintendo Switch averages 9 games per unit sold.
Yeah.
Physical games per unit sold. What's PlayStation 5 doing?
No. And an attach rate on a big PlayStation success might be 1 in 10, right? If there are 100 million copies and there's 10 million sold, 1 in 10 people purchase it, right? And then that's not always super accurate. PlayStation will probably end up at 120 million copies, units sold, right? Or plus. But, I'm sure they would want that to be 2 in 10 or 3 in 10. But anyway,
when you're talking about Spider-Man, which was one of their better selling games on the PlayStation 4, for example, sold what? 15
that was
million?
Closer to 20 now. Yeah,
closer to 20 now. Okay,
does that include
the? Yeah, but that's what we're talking about. That's Spider-Man. That's the name. That's not necessarily the game. The game was awesome. Don't get me wrong, but that's the name as well. And that's 20 million. That's just breaking on the top 10 of your competitor's console, and that's got everything going for it.
one thing they're doing before we wrap up this topic that I think is a smart move and I think is very astute is their push to TV and movies right now, because I think that's their way in, right? Like, Last of Us now is bigger than it's ever been because of the show. It just brings eyes to the games. So I think that's...
You got another Uncharted movie.
Yeah. Where's Mark Wahlberg with the mustache? Like, that was a smart move. And
yeah, but you've also got it from Xbox side with Fallout.
Yeah, exactly.
It's everyone's move now.
Everyone's move. But I think they've done it the best, right? Like, I don't think, not to compare it to Microsoft, but what happened to Halo shouldn't have happened. Where I think Sony hasn't... I mean, Uncharted was okay.
Need for Speed.
Well, they had Gran Turismo. That was really good. Uncharted was okay. Last of Us was really good. Twisted Metal did really well. Like, I feel like it's been a smart move. But anyway, like,
actually, I saw the Ratchet and Clank film again yesterday.
Yeah, that wasn't very good.
I liked it.
But all in all, like, Sony are, in first place. And I appreciate the fact that they're not standing still. And I hope now with Herman kind of hopefully having a bit more of not a shorter leash, but hopefully there's a bit more focus, and hopefully we do truly learn from Concord and they do take the mistakes and are more smart and strategic moving forward, because money's not limitless. Sony's a much smaller company than Microsoft, and they're making money hand over foot, but they still need to be cautious because margins are thin, games are expensive, and you only have so many games in you, in terms of, if you're a developer and you're working 5 years on one game at a time, if not more, you only have a handful of games in your life, right? Before you retire. You need to make everyone hit. So that's my closing thoughts.
Well, that actually segues nicely into our next topic, which is about a game that has become a hit, and that's Call of Duty Black Ops 6, releasing day and date on Xbox Game Pass. Now, we did do a little bit of a talk about this last episode about, where it would sit, if it didn't sell well, or if it did sell well, if there was bumping Game Pass subscribers and all that sort of stuff. And Josh, I think we were right.
We did. Yeah, we if you go back and listen 2 weeks ago, we said that the feedback was this was going to be the most played Call of Duty, most high player count, more, that type of
break records,
but not specifically talk sales, which Microsoft don't necessarily do. But I mean, stepping back from all that, Black Ops as a launch, I mean, the game's done extremely well. It's reviewed extremely well. It's one of the most high-rated Call of Duty games in the last 10 years, and that's coming off the back of Modern Warfare 3, which wasn't very good. But Sean, you've actually played the game. The gameplay you are seeing on screen and have been seeing for the last 40 minutes is Sean's gameplay. So maybe even before we talk specifics around its launch and success and Game Pass and all that, what are your impressions of the game? Have you finished the campaign? Have you just been doing multiplayer? Take it away.
I have not done multiplayer yet. I've always got a pattern with Call of Duty games when I do play them to get through the campaign, because that also gives you the best tutorial that you can get in terms of how to play, and then you go into multiplayer to get squashed. So I'm still playing the campaign, and one of the things that I really appreciate about it is some of the set pieces are very good set pieces. Some of the options that you have to be able to do the missions are very, not obvious, but you can really decide how you go about a mission. So, and the character will tell you, hey, this is the moment. Do you want to get some guns and go charging in the front door, guns blazing? Or do you want to try and stealthily work your way through this operation? And you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do. So that's awesome. Because it's a Call of Duty game and we're thinking bash, crash, all that sort of stuff, I'm going to do 2 playthroughs of the campaign. The first one, I'm trying to do as much stealth as possible to see kind of, see the movement patterns and all that sort of stuff. And then once I get through it all, I'll go through it and it's like, all right, I'm walking in with a shotgun. Let's see what happens. Bash, crash, do all that sort of stuff. The game looks great. The game plays great. There's a couple of little changes. Now, full disclosure, I didn't play Modern Warfare 3 because Modern Warfare 2 felt like it was an unfulfilled follow-up of Modern Warfare 1, and this is the remakes. Like I'm a big Call of Duty fan from Modern Warfare, like Call of Duty 4 back in the day, 2007, and Modern Warfare 2, which I think still is one of the best Call of Duty games of all time. But for Black Ops 6, there are some changes, like quality of life changes in a first-person shooter that I really like. For example, did you know you can sprint running backwards? I didn't.
Makes total sense.
But I found out I'm trying to back away from this big brute, and I'm able to sprint backwards while shooting my shotgun. And it feels so smooth in terms of playing. And you know, you've got your tap to slide or you hold to jump when you're crouching and moving. There's little movement things like that just work. But some of the set pieces in terms of location wise, and okay, you've got the window down the side and you kind of like, you feel like you're figuring it out for the first time, but in reality it is purely scripted. Like you're walking down an alleyway and it's like you see some boxes leading up to on top of a truck and you're like, hang on, I'm pretty sure that's at a height I can climb. And you'll climb up there, you'll see a vent. And it's like, hang on, there's a vent up here. I'm trying to get into this building, and like it walks you along it. Now, Call of Duty games have been doing this for years. Don't get me wrong. Like this is normal for a Call of Duty game, but it's feeling very organic, and that's the thing that I appreciate about it. The fact that you've also got a home base that you can upgrade during the game, and like you can find like cash during levels. So previously it'd be like collecting intel as like a collectible, but now you can collect cash, and so that cash can be used to upgrade your abilities in the campaign, or it might be to unlock guns in multiplayer, you know, that sort of thing. So I'm actually having some good fun with it.
Yeah.
And I from all the reviews and from talking to people who have been playing it, and I haven't spoken to somebody that's played it on PlayStation yet. I think that's also another thing. Every single person that I'm speaking to is either playing it on Xbox or playing it on PC.
Interesting.
For Game Pass. So I think that's very interesting. But everyone's saying that it's, a welcome return. It's very enjoyable. Apparently multiplayer is good. That's kind of where it's at the moment. I'm still only a few levels into the campaign, so I'm still really like testing it through. But it like the campaign feels like a regular campaign. It's pretty cool. There's a couple of like nice little walking missions and stuff. I haven't done the all gillied up variant for this one yet, but I hope there is.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to potentially playing this one. I think I'm going to save this for like Christmas time, you know, just something I can maybe after Metaphor get my RPG done, and then I can, you know, just blaze through a first person shooter. But you know, it's launch, and it's all signs point to this being one of the better Call of Duties, if not the best in a very long time. So interesting your point around, or your thought around the people you're talking to playing on Xbox. That's an interesting thing, and I guess kind of leads directly into the Game Pass discussion and what's kind of come from it. So yeah, take it away.
So when you load up the game through the Xbox, it's not Call of Duty Black Ops 6. It's the Call of Duty app. So if you haven't played a Call of Duty in a couple of years, it is just Call of Duty. You load it up, and it has Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 6, and it's got one of the other ones. I think it's Black Ops 5.
Has it got like
maybe.
the war? What's it called? The free first person shoot. The battle royale.
Warzone.
Warzone.
I
was gonna say Warfare.
No. Warzone's its own separate one, but because that one. So Warzone was included with Modern Warfare 1.
Okay.
Remake.
Yeah.
So this one has Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, and Black Ops 6. And so you kind of pick which game you're going to do.
Are you playing on console or PC?
I'm playing on console.
Console, okay.
I'm playing on console. There has been a couple of little jitters, I think. Just a couple. I think maybe 2 or 3. I might have captured one on the footage that you see. But otherwise, it's one of those ones that you load into the Call of Duty app. You can pick, okay, so out of the games, which one do you pick? Okay, do you pick multiplayer, zombies, or campaign? And you kind of go through there. So in terms of getting to it, pretty simple. when you download it, you're basically downloading 3 Call of Duty games.
Yeah, I saw Donkey's video on like him playing Call of Duty. It was just like it was a PC thing, but it was like downloading the game, and then it was copying, and then it was installing, and then it kept going back to zero for some reason.
Yep. Because you're downloading 3 games. It's like when you're downloading the Master Chief Collection, and then it downloads Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo 4, Halo 3 AEST, Halo Reach. It's doing them all individually. Or Halo 2 Remastered. So it's like that sort of thing. But in terms of like marketing, has been huge.
Huge.
Huge. The actual app itself is it's pretty easy to navigate and all that sort of stuff. As I said, I've had a couple of like little, like not glitches, but maybe the lighting just flickers a little bit or something like that, which you can tell is not meant to happen. But otherwise, in terms of having it on Game Pass, I think while playing through it, I am thinking like, would I pay full price for this game? And I think the fact that it is split up into campaign, zombies, multiplayer, 100% feels like it would be best suited to Game Pass. Where I think they've gone with the money wise, and I think this is an Activision thing that they've had for a few years now, is through like Battle Pass and through cosmetics and through guns and that sort of stuff. I think that's where they're going to be pushing the microtransactions. Which they've been doing for a little bit now, especially after Warzone. But I think that's where a lot of it's going to be pushed. So don't be surprised to see like a new pack come out, every week or every 2 weeks.
Taylor Swift,
like that. Yeah, basically all that sort of stuff. Don't be surprised to see that coming into the game.
Well, we've got a few quotes I'll quickly read through, and then we can go through in a bit more detail. So, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 has set new opening day and weekend launch records for the 20-plus-year-old franchise. With its October 25th release. According to Microsoft Gaming, that's funny, Black Ops 6 was available to Game Pass customers at launch as part of Microsoft's push into its subscription service overall revenue strategy. The game was heavily marketed by Activision across social media, TV, live experiences ahead of its debut. Last week's launch of Black Ops 6 was the biggest Call of Duty release ever, setting a record for day one players as well as Game Pass subscribers on launch day. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said during the company's quarterly earnings call on Wednesday that just passed. Quote, and unit sales on PlayStation and Steam were also up 60% year on year. However, Microsoft did not disclose specifics for any number of those Black Ops 6 metrics or comparable figures for any previous Call of Duty game on Xbox. So,
Two notes,
go.
So the unit sales on PlayStation and Steam were also up 60% year on year. It's not that hard when the last game was shit.
Yep.
And the fact that they've said that Game Pass subscriber ads on launch day is a record. So that means Starfield, that means Halo Infinite, that means any game on launch, not launch of the service, but any game on launch, which I think we were talking about last week. Wouldn't be surprised to hear that. There it is.
And then if you look at, we've got some physical UK sales that have come in. So you can check Christopher Dring out on Twitter if you want more information. But this is from his Twitter account. UK physical sales are in for Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Launch sales are 10% lower compared to Modern Warfare 3. This is almost entirely due to the drop in sales on Xbox, which was inevitable with Game Pass. PS5 sales remain steady year on year. Then when you look at their sales breakdown from platform, and then again, this is taken out of UK sale, and this is a split per platform. PS5 accounted for 70% of the sales of the game. 16% was PC, 10% was Xbox, and then 4% was PlayStation 4. So, I guess I'll start in terms of where this all sits. This is somewhat unexpected. Like, there was always going to be a drop in sales because of Game Pass, right? Just inherently by the nature of a service offering the game. I think it's too early to take... obviously the game's a success. I'm not talking about that, but it's too early. Like, I've seen people running with the narrative of, see, the game's selling less, blah, 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 blah. Xbox bad, Game Pass bad. I think it's way too early to start even thinking that yet, because if they can offset the copies sold with more people playing and more people spending money, they might have a game that sells less physically or virtually, like selling less, but making more money because more people are playing it. I think that's an overall win. It is interesting to see, like, we talk about the Game Pass effect in terms of, like, how does the sales of a game drop? So it is interesting to see the drop of, what was it, 10% lower compared to Modern Warfare 3, which again is interesting because Modern Warfare 3 is notably, a bad launch. So I've got more information here. In total, sales of Black Ops 6 are down 15% compared to... okay, so one article saying 15%, one saying 10%. So between 10 and 15%.
Yeah.
And 46% compared to Modern Warfare 2. So that is interesting. Down 15%, 10 to 15% when compared to Modern Warfare 3, and 46% when compared to Modern Warfare 2. And again, this is talking UK specific sales, which is Microsoft's second largest market besides America, right? So
what that tells me is that, yep, there is the Xbox Game Pass effect, but what would be the figures in terms of PlayStation for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 to Modern Warfare 3 to now? Because if Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 6 are even keel, and there's been that drop in Xbox, and that's a 10 to 15% drop on Xbox. So is that then a 10 to 15% drop in sales to be increase on Game Pass? Like, for example, if it was, let's say, 1 million copies, right? If 10% was 1 million copies, which obviously no, but did that million subscribe to Game Pass to be able to play it? And so instead of buying the game, they've subscribed.
Yeah.
That's where, we're not going to find out until maybe the next earnings call, maybe never, because they don't really like giving out the figures of how many subscribers they have on Game Pass anymore. But that would be the story to run with, because you want to see if those sales equated to Game Pass subscriptions or Game Pass subscribers. And even then, you look in 6 months' time. Like at the moment for us, Game Pass Ultimate's, I think, $22, $23. So in 6 months' time, that's the cost of the game.
Yeah,
basically.
And this is taken from Push Square as well, which I guess gives a little bit more context. It says during physical sales are 10% lower compared to Modern Warfare 3, which is what we said, between 10 to 15%. And then this is from Push Square adding a bit of context, which is due to Game Pass. While sales on Sony's system are in line with expectations. To be clear, Modern Warfare 3 sales were also down compared to the entry before. But the difference is that its physical sales were at least consistently down across the board, whereas Black Ops 6 is only being physically down on Xbox. So what it's saying is Modern Warfare 3 saw consistently sales drop across all platforms, right? And that was probably due to the reception of the game, right? It was negatively, seen. Whereas Black Ops 6 only has, again, this is a physical drop, and Xbox is mostly a digital marketplace on Xbox. So, a few things to take from this.
People are buying PlayStation.
Yeah, a few things to take away from this, right? This is just one market. This is just physical sales, and Xbox is primarily a digital marketplace. I do think that there is some interesting dialogue in what the effect is, and is it a 10% drop? I don't think its answer is that, right? Like, it's not every game that launches on Game Pass is going to be 10% sell 10% less than it would if it didn't. I don't think you can't just take that as a blanket statement, but there was always going to be the effect of the game selling less on Xbox. Again, if they can make that up with microtransactions and exceed that number, then they're in the clear. But it is interesting to at least see finally an example, written example of the effect, because you don't ever see it, right? Microsoft's never going to say, Halo Infinite sold X% worse than Halo whatever because it didn't launch into Game Pass or whatever. It's always going to be players and how much time spent in the game. So there is that effect, but for those that are taking this as an L, I think again, you're misguided. I think it's too early to make those claims. If we don't see announcement of Game Pass subscribers growth, and not in terms of day one Game Pass subscribers. Like, what does that look like in 6 months?
Yeah.
12 months. So those people stick around. That's the real indicator. But from all accounts, like, Call of Duty was nearly too big to fail in this service. And I went on, I guess, on the record last fortnight when we spoke about it to say that I don't think it was going to change much, because I think there is just the crowd of Call of Duty people that buy Call of Duty who will buy Call of Duty. And even if they could get it for $20 on Game Pass, they will still just buy it, because it's like, it's the one game we play all year, or one or two games that we play all year. It's tradition. I've been buying it every year for the last 15 years. That's what we do. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the Game Pass people play it. We're seeing the smart consumer, people who are engaged in shows like this, subscribe to Game Pass knowing that it's come. But your average Joe Blow who plays Call of Duty every year probably doesn't even know Game Pass exists still, and is still just buying it. But again, physical sales are down. But then there was a 60% increase on PlayStation. So either way, like, any way you cut it, it's a massive release. It's a massive success. It's a massive success for Microsoft, but it's a massive success because of its dual launch on Game Pass and increased sales on PlayStation. And if anything, it's just going to further cement that multi-platform push is probably the right way to go.
So, okay, so this kind of begs the question, and this was the whole thing with the Activision acquisition. Was, Call of Duty coming to Game Pass, sure. Is Call of Duty going to come to other platforms? And it was like, we'll do it on a case-by-case basis. Until, obviously, it got to the stage where they're like, okay, yes, we'll have it on other platforms, and it had to basically be set in stone. But let's say that didn't happen. Let's say, in a different world, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 only released on Xbox and PC through Game Pass or through unit sales. What do you think the reception would have been? Obviously, yep, they don't get the PlayStation sales. Okay, we get the sales part. But what do you think the reception would have been for the game? Because this is something that you're also going to look at when you've got like Elder Scrolls 6 coming out. Like, if that doesn't drop day one on PlayStation, which I have a feeling it will, because it's too big of a game to basically have just on Xbox. But if Call of Duty was only available on Xbox and PC and not available day one on PlayStation, what do you think the reception would have been?
I think, honestly, we are beyond the time where, back with PS1, 2, and 3, every generation was a refresh. So people went from PlayStation to Xbox. They might have went from PS2 to 360 to PS4, and you kind of jumped around. Now that your library is consistent and games move forward, and most games are evergreen in terms of just, add content, I don't think you can make a game anymore that will make someone switch entirely. So even a game like Call of Duty, Call of Duty not launching on PlayStation would have been a disaster for Microsoft and Activision. The games, obviously you played it, but I've seen, like, when you load up the game, it's like, how many studio names are mentioned? Like High Moon, Raven, like, it goes on and on. Sledgehammer, well, not Sledgehammer, but Treyarch, like, all of them. Treyarch. They're all there, right? It would have been such a financial loss that it wouldn't have justified the game's development. They can't do it. So,
I think you do raise a good point, though, about how we are ingrained in our historical library.
Yeah, nothing's making me switch.
That's going to stop you. That's going to stop you from changing consoles. Like you and I are in privileged positions in a sense, where we've got libraries from different platforms and catalogs, and so it's not really a big of an issue. But like, I've got people who, they have a PlayStation and they don't subscribe to PlayStation Plus. They've got their PlayStation games, and it's like, okay, well, Halo comes out. Are they going to sell their PlayStation or their games just to get an Xbox and Halo? No, they won't.
My friends are here. My games are here. I've been playing for 10 plus years here.
Yeah, I've got games that I bought on the system 10 years ago. Like, the moment you switch over, you lose all of that, which, it's almost like you are investing
Yeah.
in your platform of choice, and you have to get in early.
And Microsoft know that. Phil Spencer went on the record and said we lost the worst generation, which was the PS4 and Xbox One, because that's the generation people became ingrained. That was the first generation where it was like moving forward, all your game purchases physically and digitally are carrying over to the next console. And people made their bed, and now people won't move. And Microsoft know that is why they're doing what they're doing, because it's like, and Phil Spencer said it, Starfield could have been an 11 out of 10, and it wouldn't have brought people across. It could have been. It could have been if it was reviewed as the game of the
generational game.
I still probably wouldn't have. I wasn't interested to begin with, but it's still. I probably wouldn't have done anything. You know what I mean? Like, I would have just loaded it up on my PC to try it, which I still could, but that's still not enough for me to go buy an Xbox. They know that. Like, that's the thing. We're saying things that they already know, and people just don't want to believe that fact, and they think it's a fanboy thing to say what I'm saying, when it's like, well, no, the CFO of the company, the CEO of the company, the head of Xbox is telling you this. People won't move across, so you need to go to where people are. And ultimately, what Microsoft's doing, and I said this from the very beginning, people said, is this going to be the end of Xbox? I said, no, this is the thing that is going to keep them around forever. Beyond the time where we have a console, Microsoft is going to be one of the biggest players, because they're going to have their footing in releasing multi-platform, mobile, cloud. They're everywhere. Sony's the one that's going to have to do the pivot, which works in their favor, and they do that all the time, where it's like, wait, right at the last minute, then we'll do it. Like, Microsoft's been launching onto PC for how long? Like 10 years? Sony's only just started doing it, and they're still not even launching day and date. Like,
so funnily that you mentioned that, because that ties into the first topic that we had in today's show about games as a service and Sony, and how they're starting to look not necessarily reckless, but they're starting to look like they're having to make decisions. They're having to change things. Maybe that is because we're so out of it from a consumer end, because we just see the end of it. Whereas, as you've said, Microsoft know exactly what they're doing. They know what the game's going to look like in 20 years. They're positioning themselves in a way so that way they're going to be the powerful player. And Sony's realized that, whether it's through their own research, or, maybe this Activision Blizzard King acquisition, like maybe that's kind of really opened their eyes, because now they've got the facts. And it's a case of, well, we need to do something.
It's the monthly active users. And when you've got games, the biggest games in the world available on your previous generation console, why buy a PS5 when I can play FIFA still on PS4? I can play Fortnite. So then it makes it hard. And then when Sony releases the next God of War and it's only on PS5, like, it's all a ripple effect. If everything was moving forward, that's what moved console generations forward, right? Was when PS3 launched, that was it. Games were developed for PS3, and PS2 was in most cases left behind, right? So that meant that if you wanted to play Call of Duty, if you wanted to play FIFA, not FIFA, because that was on PS2 forever, but you know what I mean? Like, most of the big games you had to upgrade. Where now you could consistently just play on PS4. Horizon was still there. God of War Ragnarok was still on PS4. You could,
Which is funny, because that's what PlayStation said right at the start. They're like, yep, and we even said they are generational. They talk about the next console. You're starting with a new one.
Not anymore. You can't
Not
be.
anymore. And Xbox has got that from a software digital perspective, and PlayStation is still kind of doing the games thing.
And then what happens with PS6? Do people from PS4 go to PS6, or do they upgrade to a PS5? And then they're in the same position again, where their previous generation is still around. And I think that works both ways, because those consoles are cheaper to make and they make more money selling them. But it also means it stifles the games. Like, I think next generation, you're not getting exclusives in terms of PS6 exclusive, Xbox, whatever. Every game that comes out,
or Xbox.
It'll be on, if it's an exclusive, it'll be on PS5 and PS6, and that's it. Because, the people that will upgrade, and that's the delicate balance Sony need to play, not to turn this onto a Sony thing, but they're in that position where they have to do that, where Microsoft don't care if you don't buy the Xbox. They don't care if you play it on PC. Sony cares if you play it on PlayStation. But how do they convince people to upgrade if 80% of the games that release are on their previous generation? I will upgrade because I'm a day one consumer and I love it. But someone like my younger brother who's, maybe say 15, say if he was 15 when PS6 came out, like, And he goes, well, why would I can play Call of Duty, I can play Fortnite, I can play everything on my PS5. Why should I upgrade? Good point.
Well, that's actually like one of the things that Xbox has been doing recently, and you might not have noticed because I know you probably don't buy a lot of physical Xbox games,
No.
but they used to have like Xbox One on the spine and all that.
Yeah,
sort of
just
stuff.
says Xbox
It
now.
just says Xbox, and on the front it'll tell you like Xbox Series and Xbox One, or it'll just have Xbox because it's going to work on both.
And maybe, maybe a step, and to wrap this up, the step of consoles dying, not that I ever want them to die, and I don't think they ever will die, but I think what will die, perhaps, is the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as opposed to PlayStation. 5 years' time, the new PlayStation. It's just, and it's, you could play on the PlayStation that's 2 generations old or 1 generation's old, and it just runs worse and worse, but it's all PlayStation, and it's all one ecosystem.
All right. My mum's been calling it the Nintendo since the 90s.
My dad says the Atari still.
There you
That's
go.
his connection.
But it's the Atari. It's the Nintendo.
Get off the Atari. I'm like, Dad.
It's a PlayStation 4.
It's a PS3 at the time. Leave me alone. But anyway, congratulations, Call of Duty and Microsoft. Massive success.
Yeah, basically. If you do have Game Pass, I actually recommend giving it a crack and playing through it because it is fairly solid and the reviews are showing that as well. Which is always nice to see. I think actually it got actually, you know what? Before we finish up, there's something I do want to mention about reviewing for a sec. Have you seen the reviews for Mario and Luigi?
No.
The
I heard IGN gave it a really low score.
IGN gave it a 5.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure they got a guest reviewer on. I saw an image. I'm not sure if it's true. I should look it up. But there was like a screen for a guest reviewer, and it was Logan Paul.
Nah.
Or Jake Paul. Sorry, Jake Paul. And it gave him a 5 out of 10. But like everyone else is like 9s and like 8s.
Nintendo always gets a bit solid. Of a bump though. I do feel like that.
Yeah, but then they're like a 5.
Like it's just like Mario. The new Pokemon's an 8 or 9 out of 10. I'm like, well, it's running like 10 frames per second. Why are we giving this a 9? But anyway, that's a completely different discussion.
And Black Ops, by the way, is at an 84 Metascore.
Yeah, that's great.
84. So, which is very good because when you're looking at, the recent releases, there's been a couple which, like, for example, Dragon Age, which I'm not going to go to too much detail now because I haven't played it and I'm sure you're thinking about playing it.
I've got a copy sitting on my desk.
There you go. So that got an 83 on Metacritic, but the user review score has trashed it.
Yeah, that's why
you don't need to. Yeah, you don't need to buy it to review it
because I'm like,
you don't need to buy it to review it. It doesn't make sense to me.
I'm like,
there you go.
I need to know because how can a game be a best RPG of the year and then the worst RPG ever made all in one? I'm like, I just need to try this because
Well, Mario and Luigi Brotherhood got an 80, by the way.
Yeah.
So
I think Nintendo could take a shit and someone would still give it a 10 out of 10. But anyway.
Hey, they had this Mario Party game, which was terrible. It was just mini games. And everyone's like, yeah, but I like Mario Party because of the mini games, but I want to play on a board too. And they're like, well, we don't care. Here's a free-for-all mini game. Have fun.
Here's a clock.
Smash each other with a hammer. Yeah, here's a clock. Here's an alarm clock for $140. Yeah. Anyway, so we are going to wrap up our show. Firstly, we're going to talk about the games that we're currently playing. Obviously, I'm playing Black Ops 6. A couple of other games that I'm touching on. I'm still doing a little bit of Disney Dreamlight Valley. That's my go-to relaxing game. And I'm also getting stuck into Tunic. Remember Tunic?
Yep.
So I'm starting to play through that. I'm enjoying it, but I want to finish Black Ops 6, finish the campaign first and go through that. Josh, what are you playing at the moment?
Still playing through Dragon Ball Z, but mostly playing Metaphor. And I'm about 25 hours in at this point, and it's got me. This is the Atlas game to finally get me. I was talking to our friend Vinny about, I tried Persona 5 very briefly, tried Persona 3 Reload, got about 10 hours through that, and it just wasn't clicking. And I said to him, I think it's the shift in tone. Like, the high school setup just didn't work for me, and, like, the character designs didn't work for me. The whole thing didn't work. Metaphor is just clicking on every level. I love the class system that is implemented, which is an old thing from Final Fantasy. I love that, where it's like, you can make any character your mage by equipping the mage archetype onto them, which then changes their weapon and their playstyle. But you don't have to like invest in building someone as the mage, and then that's their only role. You can swap, and look, I'm going 100 miles per hour, but I want to do a dedicated review discussion on Metaphor when we get to that point, once I've finished it, or at least when I'm much further in the game. But I did want to show you this. Have you heard the battle theme for Metaphor?
No.
All right, I'm going to play it through the speaker. This thing's like... It's so good. It's so addictive.
Okay, all right.
Let's see if it comes through. You hearing this?
No.
Really?
No.
No.
There's little whispers. You know that your microphone has like a setting that drowns out like
Background noise
and such?
All right, well...
Yeah.
I'll send you the link. The battle theme in this game is incredible, and the whole purpose of Metaphor is about like the whole point. It's called Metaphor, Fantasia, right? Like it's a metaphor for the human condition in terms of like how it relates to politics, how it relates to racism. That's a big part of the game, right? And
all right.
It's that much it's so deep that the battle music it's got a vocal, I think it's sung like by a monk, but the language that they speak in the battle theme is I googled it before. It's called Esperanto, which is a real language that was created, that was like a made up language that all nations could speak. But the whole purpose of the game is about unity and bringing people together. Like it's this little...
It's like Latin.
Yeah, it's like a Latin language, but like little details like that, right? Like it's because you hear it and you're like, what language is this? And then you do a bit of research and it's like, oh my God, they chose the language that's about unity and bringing people together in a game that's about unity and bringing people together. So,
what a woke game.
Oh, it's so good. I can't wait to talk about it. And I'll send you the link to the battle theme. But man, this game's... I'm thinking about it night and day. I'm going to bed thinking about it. I have some issues with it, which I'll talk about at a later date. But all in all, this is right. One of my favorite games this year.
Oh, okay. Big call early on. But we'll find out a little bit more of that when you do finish it late next year. No, it's not that long of a game. It's okay. But otherwise, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. It's been a little bit different. We're recording this during the day. I'm on annual leave.
And I'm working.
Josh is in between meetings, so we managed to find some time to do it over the course of the effectively long weekend. But anyway, hopefully you guys have enjoyed today's episode. This has been episode 15 of Busy Playing Something. I've been your host for today, Sean, as always joined by Josh. You can find us on our social media. As I said at the top of the show, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, as well as on YouTube here for video content. You'll be able to find me at Holy DePrawn on X, formerly known as Twitter. You can find Josh at Joshua LaRosa. Do you have any final things you wanted to say, Josh, before we wrap it up for today?
No, just thank you for your time. Obviously, a fortnightly show. And I want to give myself props for the name of today's episode. PlayStation has a gas problem. I think that's actually, if you got some intellect, you think, oh, it's pretty good. Pretty good.
Lack of intellect, mate.
Yeah, well.
Come on.
I think I've got a gas problem.
They have a gas problem if Stalker does really well on Xbox. That works.
3 months later, it's on PlayStation. Who cares?
Stalker?
Yeah, it's only coming out. It's only a 3-month thing.
That's wild. Okay, anyway. So that's us for today. Thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully we can get native PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 5. So that way I can actually play some of these games I've got back here.
See you in a fortnight.
That'd be really nice.
Bye-bye.
See ya.